Okay, we're going to talk about how to use this digital volt ohm meter, or DVOM, or sometimes they call it a DMM, a digital multimeter. This has got several functions on it, and this is a very basic one. You can buy these relatively cheap. You can get ones that are hundreds of dollars. This is one of the cheaper ones. And this one, you have to select the amount of voltage, the size that you want to measure. We're talking about that here in just a minute. Some of them have an auto ranging feature, which is really nice. Another thing I want to show you is this has an on-off switch. So on and off. Make sure you turn it on and off when you're done using it, okay? Now, we're going to talk about DC volts, ohms, and amps, and right here. So there's a 5 amp, and there's the milliamp. All right. The first thing you're going to want to do is get your black test lead. Black goes to COM all the time, every time, no exceptions. Okay. COM, you see right here, it's a ground. So black goes to COM. Your red one lead is the one that's going to switch around. Now, when we go to measure amps, you want to start off with the 5 amp. You got to put it up here and then select your lever over to 5 amp. But if you want to do something like 500, this is right here, 500 milliamps or less, then you're going to go to that one right there. Always start with the higher settings, so that way you don't blow a fuse. There is a fuse inside here that can blow. All right, so for measuring voltage, ohms, and milliamps, you want the red lead in that one right there, in that cavity right there. Okay. I'm going to start by measuring a AA battery, which is pretty standard, and AA batteries are 1.5 volts. Says it on there, right there, 1.5 volts, okay? I'm going to start the 250 volt scale. I'm going to turn my meter on, and I'm going to take my negative lead and put on the negative, my positive on the positive, and 0.001, which is basically saying that that's not a very accurate reading. Need to dial it down. Okay, so let's go down here to 200 volts. All right, 1.5. Okay, so I'm getting there. Let's go down to 20 volts. 1.51. See, I gained a decimal point, which means that it's more accurate reading. Let's go to 2000 M, which is millivolt. 1 volt is 1000 millivolts. All right, put this right here. So now I have 1509, 1510. So that's really telling me more accurate voltage reading. Let's go to the 200, and this should say like 1. Yep, 1, which if you see that on your digital multimeter, that means you're not in the right scale, okay? So the most accurate way to measure this battery is with a 2000 millivolt scale, okay? Now, what if you get these backwards? What's going to happen? Is it going to blow your meter up? No. All it's going to do is put a negative number, okay? So if you see a negative number, take your leads, reverse them, okay? So this is DC voltage. So this is like direct current. So same thing with a 12 volt battery in a car. Current only travels in one direction. Now AC voltage, which is right here, is how you measure AC voltage. This is how you measure stuff like the power of your house. But we're not going to get into that because we're not studying that right now. We're talking about DC voltage, okay? All right. So let's talk about amperage. And when I got my little circuit here, turn the light on, okay? When you're measuring voltage in a circuit, you want to be in parallel with it, okay? Like this. And as you see, it's negative 0.288, so it actually should be reversed, so that way I don't get the negative. Okay, but when you're measuring amperage, you need to be in series with it. So what that means is I need to take my meter and make it part of the circuit, okay? Here's my battery, positive, negative. Come over here, go to my light bulb, come down here, go to my switch, and come back over here to ground, okay? So if I want to measure amperage, I have to be in series. So which means I'm going to have to unplug somewhere from the light bulb to that piece right there and have it on the amperage scale. So here's what we're going to do. First of all, let's set up our meter. My meter, I'm going to turn it to 5 amps because I don't know, how many amps this thing's going to take. So we're going to go to 5 amp scale. I move my red terminal to the cavity there for amperage. I'm going to take the circuit, I'm going to go like this. Okay, so now I've created an open, so obviously the circuit is not working. But if I go like this, so I can go. But if I go like this, my light turns back on, and you can see I got 0.19 amps, okay? If I want to get a better and more accurate reading than that, I know now I can go down to another scale. So this right here is, now we're doing 500 milliamps, which is half an amp. 0.5 is half an amp. Okay, put it on there, light turned back on, and now I'm reading 184 milliamps. Okay, let's go down to the 20 volt scale, see what happens. Well, if you look, the light bulb is really dim, and it says one space point, and which means that we're out of the limit. So we need to be on the 200 millivolt scale in order to measure the amperage. Now, this is where you can blow the fuse in the meter, because all the current is passing through here, passing through the meter, and technically you can blow a fuse on the meter. It happens all the time. All right, so we talked about voltage, talked about amperage, talked about milliamps, and let's talk about resistance. All right, so resistance is measured. You got this little omega sign, looks like a horseshoe, okay? We got our black in the COM, and then we have this right here because this is measuring resistance. Now, whenever you measure resistance of something, you have to unplug it completely on either side, okay? So like, let's say you want to measure resistance of this LED light. I'm going to set my resistance at the 200 ohm scale here. Okay, touch them together and getting 0.4 of an ohm. Okay. All right, let's measure this LED light. See what kind of resistance this has. 1.8 ohms resistance. Okay. What if I do the 2000? .005. Going up to 20,000 kiloohms. 0.01. Okay, so we're getting farther and farther away from accurate reading. So look, a couple of things I want to mention is 1 volt equals 1,000 millivolt. Okay, 1 amp equals 1,000 milliamps. And notice this is a lowercase m. Amp is also current, so that's the same thing. So 1 ohm equals 0.001 ohms. Okay. And if you ever get confused, you can always just Google this and you can say, okay, how much is 1 volt? How do you convert 1 volt to millivolts? And it'll tell you. So Google is your friend on this one. Couple quick things of caution is, like I was saying before, if you're trying to measure, let's say you're trying to do voltage drop, and you're trying to see how much voltage is each load is taken, you go on either side and you put your voltmeter here, and you are now in parallel with the circuit. When you're measuring amperage, you are becoming part of the circuit. Your meter is becoming part of the circuit, okay? And when you're measuring resistance, you've got to disconnect each end. So, for example, let's say I want to take this wire here. This is just a jumper wire. Nice little tool to have with alligator clips on it. Let's say I want to measure resistance in this. I have to have it unplugged on each end. And then turn our meter on here. Getting about 4/10 of an ohm, 3/10, which is fine. Typically speaking, most things 5 ohms or less is usually within spec when you're talking about just measuring wire. But the point I want to make is I had both ends disconnected. So like, let's say you're in a car and you're measuring resistance on a wiring harness. You want to disconnect both ends, no matter how far away they are, to test resistance that way. Okay, you cannot leave it hooked up. All right, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please let me know. Thanks for watching.